The T series is here, and I'm not talking about Wagh Bakri Chai. You know, whenever I write these jokes, they always land. Always. Anyway, what I'm talking about is the new OnePlus 10T and the iQOO 9T. Two devices that are focused at performance and they give you the latest Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 chip. But I'm certain that you guys want to know how these phones compare when it comes to the cameras. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. If you don't know me yet, I'm Arshad. You're watching Track and Tech English. Let the battle begin. Now starting off, the specs of the cameras are in favor of the iQOO 9T. It comes with the Samsung GN5 50 megapixel sensor, which is the primary camera. Apart from that, you get a 13 megapixel ultra wide and a 12 megapixel telephoto 2x optical zoom lens. Hallelujah, that's so good. And in comparison, on the OnePlus 10T, you get the 50 megapixel Sony IMX766 8 megapixel ultra wide and the 2 megapixel macro. This is the same setup that we've seen on the Realme 9 Pro Plus as well, which is available for about 20 to 25,000 rupees. On the front, both the phones have a 16 megapixel selfie camera for selfies. By the way, the primary cameras on these phones are also optically stabilized. Let's start by evaluating the primary camera first. The sensor sharpness at the center of the image is nearly identical on both the phones at 100% crop. However, the Sony IMX766 inside the OnePlus 10T is sharper when you move away from the center. In theory, both the Sony IMX766 and Samsung GN5 are nearly identically sized sensors because the Sony is a 1x1.57 inch sensor, whereas the Samsung is a 1x1.56 inch sensor, and both of these have a pixel size of 1 micron, which doubles up to 2 microns after pixel binning. Although, like I mentioned, the OnePlus algorithm definitely takes sharper pictures, but it is slightly over sharpened when it comes to the textures. Now, when it comes to color reproduction though, in the final JPEGs, both are inaccurate. iQOO 9T tends to push all the colors in the spectrum, the reds, the blues, and the greens slightly high. And you can see OnePlus bungles up the reds out here, although OnePlus is still the lesser evil of the two. Although I would say that you should color correct in post if you want a more natural image, but if you want to share it on social media, just these colors are fine. Now in HDR, iQOO's processing controls the highlights well, and it feels like iQOO has more extended dynamic range processing. The second sample showcases more depth in the shadows as well, which lets us enjoy the contrast in the scene. It could have been slightly less dramatic in my opinion, but it is still better than OnePlus. Now moving to pictures of people, both these phones get the facial tones absolutely wrong. In fact, the facial tone of Sagar is somewhere in between these two. OnePlus can't control the rec pigmentation in the skin, where iQOO has made Sagar look fairer than usual. Although I would say OnePlus is better looking than the iQOO and with sharper textures too. But once again, the HDR picture of Sagar is better on the iQOO when it comes to pure dynamic range correction. Although I'm not a fan of the overprocessed colors, especially when you look at the t-shirt, which has turned blue from grey. OnePlus on the other hand has a terribly tone mapped look. Honestly, I can't pick a winner between these two for pictures of people because both have ample scope for improvement. Now this is just a break from regular pictures to show you a plate of nachos with guacamole, salsa and cream cheese. Now while you're drooling, I like the iQOO 9T's nice and bright picture here. Alright, let's move on to the low light shots from the primary camera. Now what I noticed is that the iQOO 9T opens up the shutter for a longer duration, especially when you fire on the night mode. You always get brighter images with sharper textures compared to the OnePlus 10T. The Samsung GN5 inside the iQOO 9T is also better when it comes to low light sensitivity compared to the Sony IMX766. OnePlus's night mode is more conservative but not bad per se, although it does lose out to the iQOO when it comes to the final image quality, where I think the iQOO does a better job in low light shots. Now if you've come this far in this video and if you like what you see, don't forget to hit the like button and maybe even comment below for the sake of the YouTube algorithm. And while you're at it, also hit that subscribe button so that you can get notified whenever we put out an awesome new tech video. Now what I particularly like about the iQOO 9T's camera setup is that 13 megapixel ultra wide, which is definitely a higher resolution sensor compared to the 8MP sensor inside the OnePlus 10T. And it goes without saying, the 13 megapixel ultra wide is sharper than the OnePlus 10T at close crop. My only wish is for iQOO to not expose it so bright, that way the highlights won't be blown out. Furthermore, the HDR algorithm benefits the iQOO 9T's camera as well, as you can clearly tell. Hey, that rhymed. My only concern with the iQOO 9T's ultra-wide is that the colors are not consistent with the primary camera. The OnePlus 10T actually does a better job when it comes to color science consistency, however inaccurate it is. Now coming back to the positives of the ultra-wide of the iQOO 9T, the low-light performance is leagues better too. Just look at the samples on your screen. You get sharper images with a brighter exposure as well. And I'm also praising the ultra-wide on the iQOO 9T so much because it also doubles up as a macro camera and offers a much closer focusing distance. It is of course much sharper and offers a much higher resolution image compared to the paltry 2 megapixel macro camera that you get with the OnePlus 10T. And what do you get instead of that extra 2 megapixel macro camera on the OnePlus 10T? You get a telephoto on the iQOO 90. And while it may not be that much sharper than a 2x digital crop from a main sensor in daylight shots, in low light shots, you can tell the iQOO 90's optical zoom 2x photo is better than the 10T's digital crop. Also, I saved my analysis of the portrait mode for the telephoto section primarily because the iQOO 90 kills here. By default, it shoots in 2x portrait mode, and you can see the difference in sharpness between the OnePlus 10T's digitally zoomed 2x portrait shot and the iQOO 90's optically zoomed one. The facial tone is nearly accurate too. This is just very, very good. Although you switch to 1x and all that praise falls apart because immediately the facial tone has gone for a toss, and so has the softness, which is a pity really. In fact, OnePlus is better here in both those aspects, which also leads me to believe that it is probably easier to do computational photography based portraits on lower resolution cameras like the 12 megapixel sensors compared to something like a larger 50 megapixel or a 48 megapixel sensor, which is probably why Google is also sticking to those cameras. Selfies are also better on the iQOO 90. You get sharper textures and a more accurate facial tone too. Even the HDR selfies clearly look far more appealing and well processed on the iQOO 90. In selfie portraits though, what I noticed is that the OnePlus 10T does have better edge detection. Bokeh blur although is equally good on both. Now similarly, low light selfies are equally sharp and good looking on both. In fact, I had to double check if it was shot using the same phone when I dumped the pictures to do my comparison. Now since these are proper flagships, you do get the option to record at 4K 60 FPS with stabilization no less. Now stabilization is largely good on both phones and I couldn't tell the difference really. However, the OnePlus 10T shoots at a higher bitrate, offers a wider BT 2020 color gamut and has a slightly better sound recording with more volume in the bass region. The iQOO 90 beats the OnePlus 10T in dynamic range and exposure correction. Do let me know in the comment section below what you thought about the image quality, the image stabilization, the sound recording. Do let me know in the comment section below what you thought about the image quality, the image stabilization, the sound recording. However, OnePlus wins it when it comes to low light video recording. I won't even talk about it because the sample footage will do that for you. The ultra wide angle camera on both these phones can only shoot at 1080p 30 FPS and the sample footage I shot looked nearly identical. Front camera video recording is also capped at 1080p 30 FPS, but the OnePlus 10T is better here because you get stabilization, sharper details, better sound and better dynamic range. Only 1080p 30 FPS video recording is possible on both these phones. Only 1080p 30 FPS video recording is possible on both these phones. Overall, I think the OnePlus 10T is a better camera for video recording compared to the iQOO 90. Now, the conclusion is that the iQOO 90 has a more versatile set of cameras, a more practical setup, and therefore it is a far fun shooter as well. Plus, for most shooting scenarios, I would end up picking the iQOO 90's camera setup over the OnePlus 10T. However, I feel that iQOO could have spent more time in the post-processing of these images, and it is definitely not as good as what we saw with Vivo's phones, which is probably the reason for the cost distinction out here as well. The OnePlus 10T on the other hand is not bad per se because in certain situations it does have the iQOO 90 sweating, especially when it comes to the video recording capabilities of this phone. Plus the image sensor sharpness in the primary camera and the color science consistency with the ultra wide are definitely better than the iQOO 90's camera setup. But similar to the iQOO 90, the OnePlus 10T's algorithm also needs a lot of work, maybe even better hardware. OnePlus just needs to work a lot on the camera setup that it offers on its phones these days, with Hasselblad's help or not. Looks like not on the OnePlus 10T. Now, which phone's camera setup do you like? Which one did you prefer? Let me know in the comment section below. Until next time, this is Ershad signing off. Keep tracking and stay safe.